Under the crisp autumn sky of Montana's Gallatin Valley, a curious scene unfolded on Route 191. Traffic had come to an unexpected standstill, but not because of construction or a collision. Something much smaller and more bewildering had captured everyone's attention. A juvenile bobcat, no larger than a house cat, darted between vehicles with unusual determination. Officer Maya Rodriguez watched in disbelief as the small feline deliberately approached cars before retreating, almost as if trying to get someone's attention. When she finally got close enough to see the tattered red bandana tied around the animal's neck, she knew this was far from an ordinary wildlife encounter. What could drive a naturally shy predator to seek human contact so desperately? Officer Rodriguez would soon discover a connection that would break her heart and change her life forever. The morning had begun like any other patrol day for Officer Maya Rodriguez. At 32, she had served with the Montana Highway Patrol for just over 8 years, having joined after completing her degree in criminal justice and a brief stint as a park ranger. The transition from protecting nature to protecting people had seemed natural, though she never lost her passion for wildlife and the breathtaking landscapes that made Montana special. Her patrol route along Route 191 between Bozeman and Big Sky took her through some of the most beautiful country in the state, winding alongside the Gallatin River where moose, elk, and occasionally bears could be spotted from the roadway. Rodriguez. Here, starting morning patrol along 191, she spoke into her radio, adjusting her sunglasses against the glare bouncing off early frost that clung to the roadside vegetation. The dispatcher acknowledged her call as Maya settled in for what she expected to be a routine day of speed violations and the occasional tourist needing directions. The call came in just after 11:30 a.m. Attention units in the vicinity of Marker 47 on Route 191. Multiple reports of traffic disruption due to wildlife on the road. Apparently, a small wildcat is causing motorists to stop. Maya tapped her radio. Rodriguez responding, "I'm about 3 minutes from that location." Be advised, Officer Rodriguez, callers are reporting unusual behavior. The animal appears to be approaching vehicles rather than fleeing. This detail made Maya sit up straighter. In her experience, wildlife on Montana roads, especially predators like bobcats, wanted nothing to do with vehicles or humans. The behavior described was concerning and potentially indicated an animal in distress, possibly rabid or injured. She accelerated slightly, flipping on her lights to navigate more quickly through the morning traffic. As she rounded a gentle curve in the highway, she immediately spotted the problem. At least 6 vehicles had pulled onto the shoulder, and traffic in both directions had slowed to a crawl. Tourists with cameras were standing at what they presumably thought was a safe distance, pointing towards something moving between the stopped cars. Maya pulled her patrol car onto the wide shoulder, positioning it to protect the impromptu crowd from oncoming traffic. She stepped out, adjusting her Stetson and grabbing her department-issued binoculars from the passenger seat. The crisp November air carried the scent of pine and the sound of excited voices. "It keeps coming back." Should someone call animal? Control. Is it someone's pet? The comments from onlookers floated toward her as she approached, hand resting instinctively on her belt. Wild animals, especially cornered ones, were unpredictable. "Montana Highway Patrol," she announced, making her way through the small gathering. "Please return to your vehicles for safety. What exactly is happening here?" A bearded man in a flannel jacket pointed toward the center line of the highway. "It's some kind of wildcat, officer. Been running out into traffic, then backing off when cars stop. Nearly got hit a dozen times. Strangest thing, it's like it's trying to flag someone down." Maya followed his gesture and spotted the animal, unmistakably a juvenile bobcat, its distinctive spotted coat and tufted ears visible even without binoculars. It was indeed behaving bizarrely, approaching the shoulder, then darting back toward the tree line, only to return moments later. "Has anyone approached it?" she asked, raising her binoculars for a better look. "No, ma'am," answered an elderly woman clutching a camera. "We know better than to corner a wild animal, but there's something on it, around its neck. Looks man-made." Through her binoculars, Maya confirmed what the woman had spotted. A faded red material, possibly a bandana or piece of cloth, tied around the bobcat's neck. This wasn't a fully wild animal, or at least it had had human contact at some point. "I need everyone to clear the area," Maya announced, with the calm authority that came from years of handling roadside situations. "Please return to your vehicles. This is still a wild animal and potentially dangerous." As the onlookers reluctantly retreated, Maya reached for her radio. "Dispatch, this is Rodriguez at mile marker 47. We have a juvenile bobcat displaying unusual behavior. It appears to have some kind of red cloth around its neck, possibly indicating it escaped captivity or is part of a wildlife study. Requesting contact with Fish, Wildlife and Parks." "Copy that, Rodriguez. Contacting FWP now. What are your intentions?" Maya watched as the bobcat made another approach toward the highway, stopping about 30 feet from where she stood. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Maya felt an uncanny sensation. The animal wasn't afraid of her. If anything, it seemed expectant. "I'm going to attempt to secure the scene and prevent any accidents while we wait for wildlife personnel," she replied, not taking her eyes off the bobcat. "This animal is definitely habituated to humans, but I can't determine if it's injured or in distress from this distance." The bobcat turned suddenly, trotting a few yards toward the tree line before stopping and looking back over its shoulder at Maya. Then it repeated the movement. "Forward, stop, look back." "That's odd," Maya murmured to herself. "Almost seems like..." The bobcat repeated the behavior a third time, more urgently. Every wildlife training course Maya had taken emphasized that wild animals don't seek human attention unless something is very wrong. This bobcat wasn't behaving aggressively or erratically, as one might with rabies. Instead, it seemed to be deliberately trying to communicate. Against her better judgment, Maya took a few steps forward, maintaining a respectful distance. The bobcat's ears perked up, and it moved again toward the trees, stopping once more to look back at her. "I think it wants me to follow it," she said incredulously into her radio. "Dispatch, advise FWP I'm observing from a safe distance, but this animal appears to be trying to lead me somewhere." "Rodriguez, please confirm you're maintaining safe distance from the wildlife." The dispatcher's voice crackled through her radio, concern evident in the tone. "Affirmative," Maya responded, though she had already taken several cautious steps toward the tree line. "I'm keeping at least 30 yards between us. The animal appears to be deliberately trying to communicate. FWP says their nearest officer is at least 40 minutes out. They advise you to secure the road and wait for their arrival." Maya watched as the bobcat paced impatiently at the edge of the forest, its behavior growing increasingly urgent. Something in her gut told her this wasn't a situation that could wait 40 minutes. In her 8 years with the highway patrol, she'd developed an instinct for when to follow protocol to the letter and when circumstances called for judgment calls. This felt like the latter. Maya Rodriguez hadn't always trusted her instincts. Growing up in Billings, as the daughter of a wildlife veterinarian father and a mother who worked as a dispatcher for local law enforcement, she'd been taught to respect both the wild world and the rules that governed human society. Her childhood home had often served as a temporary sanctuary for injured birds, orphaned deer fawns, and even the occasional bear cub. Her father, Dr. Carlos Rodriguez, had instilled in her a deep respect for wildlife and the understanding that animals operated according to their own logic, a logic that sometimes defied human expectations. "Animals don't behave irrationally," he would tell her, while tending to his patients. "If they're doing something that seems strange to us, it's Because we're missing part of the story. Those early lessons had shaped Maya's approach to her work with the highway patrol. While most of her colleagues viewed wildlife encounters as simply hazards to be managed, Maya always looked for the story behind the behavior. This perspective had earned her both respect and the occasional eye roll from fellow officers. 2 years ago, she'd been the first responder to a multi-car accident caused by a moose crossing the interstate. While others focused on clearing the vehicles, Maya had noticed the moose hadn't fled the scene, as would be expected. Following a hunch, she'd discovered a moose calf trapped in a drainage culvert nearby. Her attention to that detail had potentially saved another accident from occurring when the mother inevitably returned for her young. The department had recognized her with a commendation for that incident. Captain Harlow had presented it with a mixture of pride and exasperation. Officer Rodriguez thinks like a wildlife biologist and acts like a cop, he'd said at the small ceremony. Sometimes that's exactly what Montana needs. Maya smiled at the memory as she weighed her options in the current situation. The traffic had been redirected to a single lane, with her patrol car's lights warning approaching vehicles to slow down. The Bobcat continued its strange behavior, clearly agitated but not aggressive. She reached for her radio again. "Dispatch, I'm going to follow this animal at a safe distance. Something isn't right here." Rodriguez, be advised that FWP specifically recommended. "I understand their recommendation," she interrupted, something she rarely did. "But this animal has human interaction markers, the bandana, and is displaying behavior consistent with seeking assistance. I'll maintain radio contact and will not approach closer than safety protocols allow." There was a pause before the dispatcher responded. "Understood, Officer Rodriguez. Please maintain constant communication. Backup has been notified of your position." Maya returned to her patrol car and retrieved her emergency pack. A weatherproof backpack containing first aid supplies, emergency rations, a thermal blanket, and additional communication equipment. Standard issue for Montana Highway Patrol officers who often found themselves first on scene in remote locations where help could be hours away. She also grabbed her department-issued tranquilizer kit. While rarely used, all Montana officers received training in emergency wildlife management, given the frequency of human-wildlife encounters in the state. The kit contained a single-dose tranquilizer dart and injector, only to be used in extreme circumstances where human life was in immediate danger. "I hope I won't need you," she muttered, securing the kit to her belt before slinging the backpack over her shoulders. She approached the edge of the forest where the Bobcat waited, maintaining a respectful distance of about 25 yards. The animal's tawny coat was dulled with dust, and Maya could see now that it was thin, not starving, but certainly not thriving either. The red bandana around its neck was weathered and frayed at the edges, suggesting it had been wearing it for some time. "All right, little one," she said softly, knowing her voice wouldn't startle the animal if it was indeed accustomed to humans. "Where are you trying to take me?" As if understanding her words, the Bobcat turned and trotted deliberately into the forest, following what appeared to be a faint game trail. Every few yards, it would stop and look back, ensuring Maya was following. The forest closed around them quickly, the sounds of the highway fading behind. Pine needles cushioned Maya's footsteps as she carefully navigated the uneven terrain, keeping her eyes on both the Bobcat ahead and her surroundings. The Gallatin National Forest was home to much larger predators than bobcats. Grizzlies were still active this time of year, preparing for hibernation and potentially aggressive if surprised. Dispatch, Rodriguez checking in. "I'm approximately 150 yards east of the highway now, following a clear game trail. The Bobcat appears to be deliberately leading me deeper into the forest, still maintaining safe distance." Copy that, Rodriguez. FWP has been updated on your movement. They're still en route. The November sunlight filtered through the pine canopy, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. The air was noticeably cooler here, carrying the earthy scent of decomposing leaves and pine resin. In other circumstances, Maya would have appreciated the serene beauty of the moment. These forests were why she had chosen to remain in Montana despite opportunities elsewhere. After about 10 minutes of steady progress, Maya noticed the bobcat's behavior changing. It was moving more urgently now, occasionally making a soft chuffing sound she'd never heard before. The trail had begun to slope upward, leading toward a rocky outcropping that rose above the surrounding trees. "I think we're approaching whatever it's trying to show me," she reported into her radio. "The terrain is becoming steeper. The animal appears increasingly agitated, but not threatening." As they neared the outcropping, Maya detected something that made her pulse quicken. The faint but unmistakable smell of smoke. Not the acrid chemical smell of a forest fire, but the softer scent of a campfire that had burned recently. The bobcat had reached a narrow passage between two large boulders and stopped, looking back at Maya with an intensity that sent a chill through her. It made that strange chuffing sound again, pacing back and forth at the entrance to what she could now see was a natural shelter formed by the overhanging rocks. Maya paused, listening intently. The forest had gone quiet. No birdsong, no rustling of small creatures in the underbrush. That silence told her as much as any sound could have. Something or someone was nearby. "Dispatch. I followed the bobcat to what appears to be a natural rock shelter approximately half a mile east of the highway. There are signs of human activity. I can smell recent campfire smoke. I'm going to announce my presence before investigating further." Drawing her flashlight with one hand and keeping her other hand near her sidearm, Maya called out in a clear, authoritative voice. "Montana Highway Patrol, is anyone there? Do you need assistance?" The only response was the bobcat's increasingly urgent movements as it darted a few feet into the shelter, then back out again, fixing Maya with a stare that seemed to contain an entire conversation. "I'm coming in to check if anyone needs help," she announced, then added more quietly into her radio, "Moving into the rock shelter now. Stand by." Maya's flashlight beam cut through the shadows of the rock shelter, revealing a crude campsite that had been established beneath the natural overhang. A small fire pit contained the charred remains of what appeared to be a day-old fire, its ashes cold, but still releasing the faint smoky scent she had detected. A weathered backpack leaned against one rock wall, its contents partially spilled onto a thin sleeping pad beside it. "Hello, Montana Highway Patrol," she called again, sweeping her light across the small space. The bobcat had moved to the far corner of the shelter, pawing insistently at something on the ground. It made that strange chuffing sound again, more urgent. Now, almost distressed, Maya approached cautiously, maintaining awareness of her surroundings. The backpack showed signs of quality but hard use, expensive outdoor gear that had seen many trails. A stainless steel cooking pot sat on a flat rock, beside the fire pit, containing the remnants of what looked like instant oatmeal. "Someone was definitely here recently," she reported into her radio. "Campsite appears hastily abandoned. No signs of struggle, but..." Her voice trailed off as her flashlight beam reached the corner where the bobcat was pawing. A hiking boot lay on its side, high-end and sturdy, with a custom orthotic insert partially visible. Beside it lay a walking stick with a worn leather grip, and most concerning, a small first aid kit that had been opened and rummaged through, its contents scattered. "Dispatch, I'm finding evidence that suggests someone may be injured. The campsite contains abandoned gear, including a single hiking boot and open medical supplies. Request urgent assistance." "Copy that, Rodriguez. Search and rescue has been notified. FWP officer is now 20 minutes out. Can you determine how recent the campsite was occupied?" Maya knelt to examine the fire pit, careful not to disturb potential evidence. Based on the fire remains and food residue, I'd estimate within the last 24 hours, possibly less. The bobcat had stopped its pawing and was now staring intently at Maya, as if assessing whether she understood the gravity of the situation. Its eyes caught the flashlight beam, reflecting an eerie greenish gold that reminded Maya of her father's warnings about wild animals. Even those accustomed to humans were unpredictable, yet this one seemed different. It displayed none of the wariness typical of its species. Instead, it projected an almost human-like impatience. As Maya continued to survey the campsite, something caught her eye. Partially tucked under the sleeping pad was a leather wallet. She carefully extracted it with a gloved hand and opened it to reveal a Montana driver's license. "James Callahan," she read aloud, studying the photograph of a man in his 60s with a weathered face, white beard, and clear blue eyes that projected a lifetime of outdoor experience. The address listed was in Bozeman, just about 40 miles. North, but it was the veteran's ID card in the adjacent sleeve that caught her attention more sharply. "United States Marine Corps, retired," she murmured, feeling a new sense of urgency. The bobcat made a small sound in response, as if confirming her discovery. "Dispatch, I've located identification for a James Callahan, Bozeman resident, appears to be a retired Marine. Can you run information on this individual? Stand by, Rodriguez." While waiting for the dispatch to return information, Maya continued examining the campsite. A small notebook had fallen beside the backpack, its pages filled with neat, precise handwriting and what appeared to be sketches of local wildlife. Flipping through it carefully, she found recent entries dated just 2 days prior. Nov 14, made camp at Eagle's Perch. Shadow seems more comfortable with the elevation. Her limp is less pronounced up here, away from the damp valley floor. Wildlife. Sightings, 2 elk herds, numerous grouse, signs of bear but no direct encounters. Maya paused, looking at the bobcat with new understanding. "Shadow?" she asked quietly. The bobcat's ears twitched forward at the sound of the name. The next entry was briefer and written in a shakier hand. Nov 15. Morning, chest pain returned during night, more severe than previous episodes. Nitroglycerin, not helping as much as it should. May need to cut trip short if no improvement by noon. Shadow agitated, sensing something wrong. There was no further entry. "Rodriguez, information coming through on James Callahan." The dispatcher's voice interrupted her reading. 67 years old, retired Marine Corps colonel. Medical alert on file, history of cardiac issues. He's also registered with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks as a wildlife rehabilitator specializing in predator species. The pieces began falling into place. The bobcat, Shadow, must be one of his rehabilitation animals, Maya realized aloud. And Callahan appears to have experienced cardiac distress while camping. She scanned the campsite again with new urgency. If Callahan had suffered a serious cardiac event and left the campsite seeking help, where would he have gone? Down toward the highway was the logical choice. But that was the direction she had come from, and she'd seen no sign of him. The bobcat, Shadow, had moved to the opposite side of the shelter, pacing anxiously near what appeared to be a narrow trail leading upward, deeper into the rocky terrain above them. "Dispatch, my assessment is that Mr. Callahan may have experienced a cardiac event and attempted to relocate, possibly seeking better reception for emergency communication. The bobcat appears to be one of his rehabilitation animals and is trying to lead me further up the mountain. Rodriguez, be advised that search and rescue recommends you remain at the campsite. The terrain becomes significantly more technical above your position. A helicopter unit is being mobilized for aerial search." Maya glanced at Shadow, who was now making short dashes up the trail, returning each time with increasing agitation. The behavior was so deliberate it was impossible to misinterpret. The animal wasn't just randomly distressed. It was trying to communicate something specific about a location further up the mountainside. Then she noticed something she had missed in her initial examination of the campsite: a small satellite phone tucked into a side pocket of the backpack. She carefully removed it and checked its status: dead, battery completely drained. If Callahan had been trying to call for emergency assistance when his cardiac event worsened, he would have had no way to communicate. Dispatch: negative on remaining at campsite. The subject's communication device is inoperable, battery depleted. Given the medical alert and the animal's behavior, I believe Mr. Callahan may be incapacitated further up the trail. I'm continuing pursuit with the Bobcat as guide. Before dispatch could protest further, Maya quickly gathered potentially useful items from the campsite: the first aid kit, a bottle of water, and a light emergency blanket from the backpack. She noted a prescription bottle of nitroglycerin, tablets among the scattered first aid supplies, confirming her suspicion about Callahan's condition. She pocketed these as well. "Shadow," she said firmly, addressing the Bobcat directly. "Show me where he is." As if understanding perfectly, the Bobcat turned and began moving up the narrow trail with purpose, occasionally looking back to ensure Maya followed. The path grew steeper quickly, winding between granite boulders and scraggly pine trees that clung tenaciously to the mountainside. Maya's training kicked in as she carefully navigated the difficult terrain, maintaining awareness of her footing while keeping the Bobcat in sight. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them particularly optimistic. If Callahan had suffered a severe cardiac event on this steep section of trail, without medication or communication, she pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the Bobcat's movements ahead. Shadow moved with the sure-footed grace of a species evolved for rocky terrain, yet kept its pace measured, clearly intending for Maya to follow. "Certainly an unusual rehabilitation case," Maya muttered to herself, thinking of her father's work. Most rehabbers maintained careful distance from their predator species, specifically to prevent the kind of human attachment this Bobcat clearly displayed. Yet the relationship appeared to have potentially saved Callahan's life, assuming they reached him in time. As they climbed higher, Maya could see the valley spreading out below, Route 191, visible as a distant ribbon threading through the landscape. The November sun hung low in the western sky, reminding her that daylight would become a concern if the search extended much longer. Dispatch, still in pursuit. Elevation approximately 7,200 feet now, moving northeast up Eagles Ridge. Visibility, good, but daylight will be a factor within 2 hours. Copy Rodriguez. Search and rescue helicopter is preparing for launch from Bozeman. ETA to your position approximately 35 minutes. Shadow suddenly froze ahead, ears pivoting forward, body tense. Then the Bobcat darted forward with new urgency, disappearing around a bend in the trail. Maya hurried to follow, careful on the loose gravel underfoot. As she rounded the bend, she saw the trail opened onto a small plateau dotted with wind-twisted pines. Shadow stood at the far edge, making those urgent chuffing sounds again. And there, collapsed against a boulder with eyes closed and face ashen, was James Callahan. "I've found him," Maya called into her radio as she rushed forward. Adult male, unconscious but breathing. Location is a small plateau approximately half-mile northeast of the original campsite. She knelt beside the fallen man, noting his labored breathing and the bluish tinge around his lips. His skin felt cool and clammy to the touch, classic signs of cardiac distress that Maya recognized from her emergency medical training. "Sir, Mr. Callahan, can you hear me?" She spoke loudly while checking his pulse, weak and irregular, but present. Callahan's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. A faint groan escaped his lips. Dispatch, subject is alive but unresponsive, showing clear signs of cardiac distress. Request immediate medical evacuation. Copy that, Rodriguez. Search and rescue helicopter is now 30 minutes out. Can you stabilize? Until their arrival, Maya began assessing Callahan more thoroughly. Besides the obvious cardiac symptoms, his right ankle was swollen and bruised, visible where his hiking pants had ridden up. A fall injury, perhaps explaining the single boot left behind at the campsite. He wore a heavy flannel shirt and weathered outdoor vest, but the mountain air was growing colder as afternoon faded toward evening. His body temperature would become a concern soon. "I'll do my best," she responded, already unpacking the emergency blanket from her pack. Subject also has a leg injury that may have complicated his self-evacuation attempt. Shadow had settled just a few feet away, watching Maya's every move with unsettling intensity. The Bobcat's sides heaved with exertion, but it remained focused on its owner. As Maya wrapped the reflective emergency blanket around Callahan, she noticed a small radio device clipped to his vest. Not a typical communications radio, but something more specialized, with a small directional antenna. Understanding dawned. It was a wildlife tracking receiver, likely tuned to a frequency, matching a transmitter on Shadow's collar beneath the bandana. "You were tracking her," Maya murmured, "but she ended up tracking you instead." She carefully positioned Callahan into the recovery position, ensuring his airway remained clear. From the prescription bottle she'd recovered at the campsite, she extracted a nitroglycerin tablet and placed it under his tongue, hoping it might help ease his cardiac distress. "Mr. Callahan, James, if you can hear me, help is coming. You're going to be okay." Whether he could understand or not, maintaining verbal contact was protocol for unconscious patients. "Your Bobcat found help. Shadow led me right to you." At the mention of the Bobcat's name, Callahan's eyes flickered open. Briefly, his lips moved, but no sound emerged. "Don't try to talk," Maya instructed. "Just rest. The helicopter will be here soon." She reported his condition again to dispatch, including the administration of his own prescribed medication. Then she took the opportunity to more thoroughly assess their surroundings. The small plateau offered a relatively flat area where a helicopter could potentially hover for extraction, though the scattered pine trees would complicate a full landing. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the mountainside. Temperature would drop quickly once direct sunlight was lost. Maya removed her patrol jacket and laid it over Callahan's chest for additional warmth, leaving herself in just her uniform shirt. She could handle the cold better than a man in his condition. Shadow had moved closer, settling just beyond arm's reach, watchful eyes fixed on Callahan's face. The Bobcat's behavior continued to fascinate Maya. While she had grown up around her father's rehabilitation work, she had never witnessed a predator species showing such apparent concern for a human. "You're something special, aren't you?" she said quietly to Shadow. The Bobcat's ears flicked toward her voice, but its gaze remained fixed on its caretaker. Maya checked Callahan's pulse again, still weak, but perhaps a bit more regular. The nitroglycerin might be helping. His breathing remained shallow but steady. Without proper medical equipment, there was little more she could do besides keep him warm and monitor his condition. She took the opportunity to radio an update to the search and rescue team regarding the exact nature of their location, using coordinates from her department-issued GPS unit. The technical details of the extraction would be crucial given the challenging terrain. As she was finishing her communication, Callahan stirred more definitively. His eyes opened halfway, clouded with pain, but conscious. "Shadow," he whispered, voice barely audible. "She's right here," Maya assured him, shifting slightly so he could see the Bobcat. "She's the one who found help. She led me all the way from the highway to your campsite, then up here to you." A ghost of a smile touched Callahan's pale lips. "Smart girl. Save your strength, sir. Help is on the way. I'm Officer Rodriguez with the Montana Highway Patrol." Callahan's weathered hand moved weakly from beneath the blanket, reaching toward the Bobcat. Shadow immediately moved closer, pressing her head against his palm in a gesture so gentle and deliberate it took Maya's breath away. How long, Callahan managed, since you've been out here? I'm not sure. I found your journal entries from yesterday. It looks like you experienced symptoms last night or this morning. He shook his head slightly, wincing. No. Shadow. How long has she been gone? The question confused Maya momentarily. I first encountered her about an hour ago on the highway. Callahan's eyes widened slightly, a flash of clarity breaking through the pain. Highway? She went all the way to the highway? Yes, sir. That's where I first saw her. She was trying to get someone's attention, running into the road, then backing off. She had motorists stopped. When I arrived, she led me into the forest, back to your campsite, and then up here to you. Tears welled in Callahan's eyes, surprising. Maya, 3 miles, he whispered. At least 3 miles to the highway. She's never been that far from me, not since I found her. Maya processed this information with growing amazement. The Bobcat had ventured far outside its comfort zone, specifically to seek human assistance, then successfully led help back to its injured caretaker. Your rehabilitation work must be exceptional, she said. I've never seen a wild animal behave this way. Callahan's hand still rested on Shadow's head, fingers weakly stroking the tufted ears. Not rehabilitation, he managed. Rescue. Different. Before Maya could ask him to elaborate, the distant sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the mountainside. Search and rescue was approaching. She immediately stood, retrieving an emergency signal flare from her pack. Help is almost here, Mr. Callahan. I'm going to deploy a signal to guide them in. She moved to the edge of the plateau where visibility was best and launched the flare, its bright red trail arcing into the darkening sky. The sound of the helicopter grew louder as it approached their position. Shadow's ears flattened at the unfamiliar noise, body tensing. The Bobcat backed away. From Callahan moving toward the tree line. Shadow, no, stay! Callahan called weakly, his distress evident. Maya remembered her father's warnings about wild animals and loud machinery. The approaching helicopter would be terrifying to the Bobcat. If Shadow fled now into the gathering dusk of the mountain, wilderness, would she return, or would this rescue cost Callahan his clearly beloved companion? The helicopter was visible now, its searchlight sweeping the mountainside as it homed in on the flare's signal. Maya had only moments to make a decision that might determine Shadow's fate. The standard protocol would be to secure the human patient and let wildlife respond naturally to the disturbance. But something about this situation, the extraordinary bond between man and animal she had witnessed, demanded a different approach. Mr. Callahan, she said urgently, returning to his side, does Shadow respond to any specific commands or signals? Something that might keep her close despite the helicopter? Callahan's eyes, clearer now with the surge of adrenaline, met hers. Pocket, he gasped. Inside vest, silver whistle. Maya carefully reached into his vest pocket and found a small silver whistle on a leather cord. This, he nodded weakly. 3 short, then 1 long. Means safety, means home. The helicopter was closing in rapidly, its downdraft already beginning to disturb the trees at the edge of the plateau. Shadow had retreated further, clearly frightened but hesitating, torn between self-preservation and loyalty to her human. Maya raised the whistle to her lips and blew as instructed, 3 short blasts followed by 1 long tone. The sound cut. Through the growing noise of the helicopter, Shadow's reaction was immediate. Her ears swiveled toward the sound, and she took several tentative steps back toward them, despite her evident fear of the approaching aircraft. Maya blew the pattern again. Shadow came closer, trembling visibly, but responding to the deeply ingrained signal. Good girl, Callahan whispered, tears streaming freely down his weathered cheeks now. Good, brave girl. The rescue helicopter hovered overhead, its powerful, Downdraft, bending the tops of the pine trees and sending swirls of dust across the small plateau. Two rescue technicians were being lowered by cable, medical equipment cases secured to their harnesses. Maya shielded Callahan's face from the debris while continuing to sound the whistle pattern at intervals, watching as Shadow retreated to the edge of the clearing but, miraculously, did not flee into the forest. The first technician touched down, unhooking from the cable, which was immediately retracted to bring down his partner. He hurried toward Maya and Callahan, shouting over the deafening rotor noise. "Officer Rodriguez, I'm Eric with Gallatin County Search and Rescue. What's his condition?" "Cardiac distress with periods of consciousness. I've administered 1 nitroglycerin tablet from his own prescription. Pulse is weak but steady. He also has an injured ankle," Maya reported efficiently, helping the medic access Callahan. The second technician landed moments later, rushing over with additional equipment. Together, they quickly established an IV line and attached monitoring equipment to Callahan. Maya stepped back to give them room to work, keeping an eye on Shadow's position at the tree line. BP is 90/60, heart rate irregular, oxygen sat. 89%, the second medic called out, attaching an oxygen mask to Callahan's face. "Sir, can you hear me? We're going to get you to Bozeman Health. Just stay with us." Callahan's eyes fluttered open again, immediately searching beyond the medical personnel. "My cat," he managed weakly through the oxygen mask. "Please, my cat." The medics exchanged confused glances, then looked questioningly at Maya. "He has a bobcat. A rescue animal," she explained, pointing toward Shadow's position. "The animal actually led me to him. It's what brought me all the way up here." "A bobcat?" The first medic looked incredulous, following her gesture to spot Shadow partially hidden in the vegetation. "That's wild, but we can't delay extraction, sir. The animal will have to stay behind. Wildlife services can be notified." Callahan's hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping the medic's arm. "No," he gasped. "She's not wildlife. She's mine. Service animal." Maya's eyebrows rose in surprise. Service animal? Bobcats weren't recognized service animals under any regulation she was familiar with, yet there was clearly more to this story than she understood. As the medics prepared Callahan for transport, securing him to a specialized stretcher designed for aerial evacuation, Maya approached them. "I need 2 minutes," she said firmly, "before you take him up." "Officer, we need to move quickly. His condition..." "2 minutes," she repeated. "There's something important here that I need to understand. It could affect his recovery." The lead medic glanced at his monitoring equipment and nodded reluctantly. 2 minutes, no more. Maya knelt beside Callahan, whose eyes were clearer now with the supplemental oxygen. "Mr. Callahan, you called Shadow a service animal. What did you mean by that? I need to know so I can help her." Callahan pulled the oxygen mask aside slightly. "Inside pocket, my vest ID card." Maya carefully reached into his vest's inner pocket and extracted a laminated identification card. What she read made her breath catch. "PTSD service animal," the card stated across the top, with Shadow's photograph prominently displayed. The card included Callahan's name, contact information, and a registration number with the Veteran Service Animal Support Program, a legitimate organization Maya recognized from her department's training on service animal regulations. Below this information was printed: "This non-traditional service animal is legally protected under Montana State Exemption 12 to 41B for veterans with documented PTSD. Handler has completed required training and certification." "I didn't know this was possible," Maya said, showing the card to the medics, whose expressions reflected her own surprise. "Special exemption," Callahan managed. "For vets, 3 years of documentation, training. She saved me before. This too." Maya glanced toward Shadow, seeing the animal with new understanding. The red bandana wasn't just identification, it was a service animal marker. Shadow wasn't simply a rescued wild animal or rehabilitation project. She was legally recognized as a therapeutic service animal for a veteran with PTSD. The core. Fallujah, Callahan continued with effort. 2 tours, came home, but not really. Shadow brings me back, grounds me. The pieces clicked together in Maya's mind. The specialized training, the unusual bond, the whistle commands, the Bobcat's extraordinary behavior in seeking help. This wasn't just about a man who had rescued a wild animal. This was about a wild animal who had in turn rescued him from the invisible wounds of war. "Sir, we really need to move now," the lead medic interrupted gently but firmly. "His O2 stats are dropping again." Maya nodded, but Callahan's hand gripped her wrist with surprising strength. "Please," he whispered, "don't let them take her. Department policy. They'll seize exotic animals. She'll be euthanized or confined. She's all I have." The weight of his words settled heavily on Maya's shoulders. He was right. Standard protocol would involve fish, wildlife and parks taking custody of the bobcat, regardless of service animal documentation. Non-traditional service animals existed in a legal gray area, protected in some contexts, but vulnerable in others, especially when their handlers were incapacitated. "What do you need me to do?" She asked. "My cabin, 12 miles north, end of Aspen Creek Road, key under blue pottery by door. Take her there, instructions in desk drawer. My sister's number, please." The medics were securing the last straps on the evacuation stretcher. "We're moving, officer, now or never." Maya made a swift decision. "I'll take care of Shadow," she promised Callahan. "I'll make sure she's safe until you recover." Relief flooded his pale face. "The whistle. Keep using it. She'll follow you." As the medics lifted Callahan's stretcher, Maya leaned in quickly. "How did you find her? How did this start?" Despite his condition, a faint smile crossed Callahan's face. "Afghanistan, 2010. Patrol found orphaned cub. Reminded me. Brought her home when tour ended. Raised her. When the nightmares came, she knew. Always knew before I did. Better than any medication." The medics began moving toward the hovering helicopter, the cable descending for the stretcher attachment. Maya stepped back, processing the extraordinary story. Shadow wasn't just any bobcat. She was from Afghanistan, brought home by a Marine who had formed a healing bond with her that transcended conventional relationships between humans and wild animals. "She saved me every day," Callahan called, out as they secured his stretcher to the cable. "Now she saved me again." Maya watched as Callahan was lifted into the helicopter, his eyes fixed on Shadow until the very last moment he was visible. The bobcat made a small sound, not the urgent, chuffing from before, but something softer, almost like a mournful call. The helicopter banked away, heading toward Bozeman with its precious cargo, leaving Maya alone on the mountain plateau with a bobcat service animal and an incredible responsibility. Darkness was falling quickly now, the temperature dropping noticeably. With each passing minute, she would need to make decisions quickly. She retrieved her radio. "Dispatch, this is Rodriguez. The patient has been evacuated by search and rescue. I am now dealing with a complicated situation involving the subject's service animal, the bobcat." The dispatcher sounded understandably confused. "Affirmative. The subject has legal documentation classifying the bobcat as a PTSD service animal under Montana state exemptions for veterans." There was a long pause before the dispatcher responded. "Stand by, Rodriguez, notifying supervisor." Maya used the waiting time to approach Shadow, whistle in hand. She blew the pattern again, 3 short, 1 long, and the bobcat's ears perked. "Up immediately. It's just you and me now, Shadow," she said softly. "I promised him I'd keep you safe." Shadow regarded her with those intelligent eyes, maintaining a cautious distance, but showing no signs of fleeing. The Bobcat seemed to be assessing Maya, perhaps weighing whether this new human could be trusted in Callahan's absence. The radio crackled to life. "Rodriguez, Lieutenant Harlow, I'm told you have a wild bobcat you're classifying as a service animal? Please clarify." Maya explained the situation concisely, including the documentation she had found and Callahan's request. "That's unprecedented," Harlow replied. "FWP is insisting the animal be remanded to their custody pending verification of this exemption. They're sending officers to your location." Maya looked at Shadow, remembering Callahan's warning about what would happen if official protocols were followed. The Bobcat had literally saved her owner's life today. The least Maya could do was try to save hers in return. "Negative, Lieutenant," she responded, making a decision that could potentially jeopardize her career. "The light is failing, and descent would be dangerous. I'm going to secure the subject's campsite and equipment, then proceed to his residence. With the service animal as requested, the animal is responding to training commands and poses no threat." "Rodriguez, that is not protocol. With respect, sir, this is a unique situation involving a decorated veteran's legally documented service animal. I'm exercising field discretion to ensure both public safety and animal welfare. I'll file a complete report when I return to station." Another long pause followed. Maya could imagine the conversations happening on the other end, weighing department liability against veteran services considerations and public relations implications. Finally, Harlow's voice returned. "You have until 0900 tomorrow to resolve this situation, Rodriguez. If the documentation doesn't check out, there will be consequences. Clear?" "Crystal clear, sir. Thank you." Maya pocketed her radio and turned to Shadow. "Looks like we're going on a little trip, girl. Let's get you home." Darkness had settled fully over the mountains by the time Maya finished gathering essential items from Callahan's campsite. She worked efficiently by flashlight, packing his personal effects into his backpack, which she would now carry along. With her own gear, throughout the process, Shadow remained nearby, watchful but not interfering, occasionally responding to the whistle command when she seemed ready to wander too far. "All right, girl," Maya said, shouldering both packs. "Time to get off this mountain." The descent would be challenging in the dark, even with her high-powered flashlight. Maya consulted her GPS unit, plotting the most direct route back to the highway, where her patrol car waited. Shadow seemed to understand they were leaving, trotting ahead a few yards before waiting for Maya to follow, much as she had done earlier in the day. "You really are something special," Maya murmured, following the Bobcat's lead. The journey down took nearly twice as long as the ascent had, with Maya carefully picking her way across the rocky terrain, mindful of loose stones and drop-offs that became treacherous in the darkness. Shadow proved to be an unexpectedly helpful guide, consistently choosing the most navigable path and occasionally pausing when Maya fell slightly behind. By the time they reached the highway, it was past 9 o'clock. Maya's patrol car sat where she had left it, its reflective markings gleaming in her flashlight beam. A Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks truck was parked nearby. The FWP officer who had been dispatched earlier must have arrived and then left when the situation escalated to a search and rescue operation. Maya approached her vehicle cautiously, unsure how Shadow would react to being asked to enter it. She opened the rear door and blew the whistle pattern again. "In you go, Shadow. We're going to take you home." To her surprise, the Bobcat hesitated only briefly before leaping gracefully into the back seat, where she settled with what almost looked like familiarity. Maya wondered if Callahan had trained her to ride in vehicles, another unexpected skill for a supposedly wild animal. After securing both backpacks in the trunk, Maya radioed dispatch to update her status and anticipated route. She deliberately kept details vague, stating only that she was transporting the subject's animal to his residence as requested. The less specific information on the radio, the better, given the unusual nature of her current mission. As she drove north toward Bozeman, Maya couldn't help glancing repeatedly in the rearview mirror at her extraordinary passenger. Shadow had curled up on the backseat, eyes half closed but alert, the red bandana still secure around her neck. In the confined space of the car, Maya noticed details she had missed before. Small scars on the Bobcat's ears and muzzle, telling the story of a life that had seen hardship before finding Callahan. Afghanistan, Maya said aloud, still processing that remarkable detail. You're a long way from home. Shadow's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, golden eyes meeting Maya's in the mirror. The drive to Aspen Creek Road took nearly an hour. Winding through the darkness of rural Montana, Maya used the time to call the hospital in Bozeman, identifying herself as a highway patrol officer to receive an update on Callahan's condition. He had been stabilized and was undergoing tests, the nurse informed her. Visitors would not be permitted until morning. Following her GPS, Maya eventually turned onto Aspen Creek Road, a gravel lane that meandered into thickly forested foothills. After several miles, the road narrowed further, eventually ending at a modest but well-maintained log cabin set in a small clearing, surrounded by pine and aspen trees. This must be it, Maya said, pulling up to the cabin and cutting the engine. Shadow immediately sat up, recognizing home. The Bobcat made a soft, chirping sound, entirely different from the urgent calls earlier, and pawed gently at the window. "Hold on," Maya laughed softly, getting out and opening the rear door. Shadow bounded from the car and raced to the cabin's porch, then turned expectantly toward Maya. Following Callahan's instructions, she located a blue ceramic pot beside the front door and found the key underneath. The cabin was simply furnished but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, sturdy wooden furniture, and walls adorned with framed photographs and military memorabilia. Shadow moved through the space with the confidence of familiarity, leaping onto a well-worn leather armchair that clearly served as her regular perch. Maya set down the backpacks and took a moment to explore, hoping to better understand the man and animal she had encountered under such extraordinary circumstances. The photographs told a story: a younger Callahan in marine dress blues, deployment pictures with fellow service members in desert landscapes, and most intriguingly, a sequence of photos documenting Shadow's growth from a tiny, fuzzy cub to the magnificent adult she was now. One photo in particular caught Maya's attention. Callahan, in combat fatigues, seated against a stone wall somewhere in Afghanistan, cradling a tiny bobcat kitten no bigger than his hand. The expression on his face was one of gentle wonder, a stark contrast to the harsh surroundings. On a bookshelf nearby, Maya found rows of books on animal behavior, wildlife rehabilitation, and PTSD treatment, many dog-eared and annotated. A journal similar to the one she had found at the campsite sat on a small desk in the corner. Respecting Callahan's privacy, she didn't read it, but noted its well-worn cover, a record of a journey she could only begin to imagine. Following Callahan's instructions, Maya opened the desk drawer and found a folder labeled Shadow Emergency Protocols. Inside was a detailed care guide. Medication information: Shadow apparently required occasional treatment for a joint condition in her right hind leg, explaining the limp mentioned in Callahan's journal, and a list of contact numbers. At the top of the contact list was Catherine Callahan, sister, with a Helena phone number. Maya checked the time, just after 11 p.m., and hesitated. Late, but under the circumstances, justified. Catherine answered on the third ring, her voice alert despite the hour. "Hello, Ms. Callahan? This is Officer Maya Rodriguez with the Montana Highway Patrol. I'm calling about your brother, James." There was a sharp intake of breath. What's happened? Is he all right? Maya explained the situation carefully, detailing James's medical emergency, the remarkable actions of Shadow in seeking help, and his current status at Bozeman Health. She also explained her presence at his cabin and her promise regarding Shadow. "Oh my God," Catherine breathed when Maya finished. "But you say he's stable. They think he'll recover." "That's my understanding, yes." The medical team seemed cautiously optimistic. There was a pause before Catherine spoke again. "And you're with Shadow now? At the cabin?" "Yes, ma'am. I promised your brother I would ensure her safety until other arrangements could be made." A soft laugh tinged with what sounded like relief. "Officer Rodriguez, you have no idea what you've done. Shadow isn't just a pet or even just a service animal to James. After Afghanistan, well, there was a time we thought we'd lost him. Not physically, but mentally. The doctors called it severe PTSD, complicated by traumatic brain injury. The medications helped some, but James he wasn't living, just existing." Maya glanced at Shadow, who had curled up on the armchair, watching her intently. "Shadow changed everything," Catherine continued. "I don't pretend to understand it completely, but that bond, it brought him back. The nightmares, the dissociative episodes, the severe anxiety, they didn't disappear. But with Shadow, he could manage them, could be present again in his own life." "It's an extraordinary relationship," Maya agreed. "I've never seen anything like it. The way she sought help led me to him." James spent years training her, working with specialists in both wildlife behavior and PTSD therapy. It wasn't easy getting the legal exemption. There were hearings, evaluations, mountains of documentation, but the results spoke for themselves. His case actually helped establish Montana's exemption program for veterans with non-traditional service animals. Maya absorbed this information, her respect for both Callahan and Shadow deepening. "Ms. Callahan, I told my superiors I'd resolve this situation by morning. What would be most helpful for your brother and Shadow right now?" Catherine sighed. "I can drive over from Helena first thing tomorrow, about 3 hours if the roads are clear. If you could stay with Shadow until then, she knows me, but she's wary around strangers without James present." "I can do that," Maya confirmed. "And regarding your brother's legal documentation for Shadow, Fish and Wildlife may challenge it given the circumstances." "There's a safe in James's bedroom closet," Catherine informed her. "He keeps all Shadow's legal papers there. The combination is his military ID number. He'd want you to have access in this situation. Those documents include signed statements from 3 VA psychiatrists and the state exemption approval. That should satisfy any official inquiries." After finishing the call with Catherine, who promised to contact the hospital and be there when James was permitted visitors, Maya found herself alone with Shadow in the quiet cabin. The Bobcat had remained attentive throughout the phone conversation, almost as if understanding its importance. "Just you and me tonight, girl," Maya said softly. "Your human is getting good care, and your other human will be here in the morning." She moved cautiously to the kitchen, conscious of Shadow's watchful gaze. The refrigerator contained basics, supplies, and Maya found pet food clearly intended for Shadow in a sealed container. Following the feeding instructions from the emergency protocol folder, she prepared the Bobcat's evening meal, a mixture of specialized protein food and what appeared to be vitamin supplements. Shadow approached when Maya set the bowl down, sniffing it cautiously before beginning to eat. Maya took the opportunity to observe her more closely. Despite her wild origins, Shadow's behavior displayed clear patterns of domestication. Not like a common house cat, but certainly unlike a purely wild bobcat. Her comfort in the cabin, familiarity with routine, and apparent understanding of certain human concepts spoke to years of careful socialization. Yet there remained an undeniable wildness to her. The powerful muscles beneath her spotted coat, the intense focus of her predator's gaze, the deliberate economy of her movements. She was neither fully wild nor fully domestic. but something unique, existing in a remarkable middle ground that Maya had never imagined possible. As Shadow finished eating, she surprised Maya by approaching her directly, stopping just a foot away and looking up with those inscrutable golden eyes. Slowly, cautiously, Maya extended her hand, palm down. Shadow sniffed it thoroughly, then, in a gesture that brought unexpected tears to Maya's eyes, pressed her head briefly against Maya's fingers before turning away and returning to her armchair. "Thank you," Maya whispered, understanding that she had just been granted a rare privilege, acceptance from a creature who owed her nothing. Sleep came fitfully for Maya, dozing in Callahan's living room recliner rather than using his bedroom. She wanted to remain where Shadow could see her, maintaining the fragile trust they had established. Throughout the night, she woke several times to find the Bobcat's reflective eyes watching her from various perches around the cabin. The armchair, a window ledge, briefly even the back of the couch near Maya's head. Dawn broke with pale golden light filtering through the pine trees surrounding the cabin. Maya rose stiffly, stretching muscles sore from yesterday's mountain rescue and the uncomfortable sleeping arrangement. Shadow was curled on a braided rug near the cold fireplace, but lifted her head alertly as Maya moved toward the kitchen. "Morning," Maya murmured. "Let's get you some breakfast." She had just finished preparing Shadow's morning meal according to the instructions in Callahan's folder when her radio crackled to life. "Officer Rodriguez, this is Lieutenant Harlow. Status report requested." Maya sighed, knowing this call would come, but hoping for more time. "Rodriguez here. I successfully transported Mr. Callahan's service animal to his residence. His sister is en route from Helena and should arrive within 2 hours to assume care responsibilities." "That's going to be a problem, Rodriguez," Harlow responded, his tone clipped. "I've got the regional director of Fish, Wildlife and Parks in my office right now. They're demanding immediate surrender of the Bobcat for assessment. Apparently, word of yesterday's incident has reached the media. There's already footage online of the animal on the highway." Maya's stomach tightened. "Sir, I've reviewed Mr. Callahan's documentation. The animal is legally registered under Montana's Veteran Service Animal Exemption Program. She has all required permits." "That may be," Harlow countered, "but FWP is challenging the validity of those permits in a situation where the handler is incapacitated. Director Lawson is citing public safety concerns and wants the animal in custody while Callahan is hospitalized." Maya glanced at Shadow, who was calmly eating her breakfast, showing none of the unpredictable behavior that wildlife officials were presumably concerned about. "With respect, sir, I've observed this animal for over 16 hours now. She's well-trained, responds to commands, and shows no aggressive tendencies. Removing her from familiar surroundings could actually create the very behavioral issues they're worried about." "Maybe so, but they've secured an emergency custody order. They're sending officers to your location now, ETA 30 minutes. Maya felt a flash of indignation. "An emergency order? On what grounds?" "Public interest concern. The video going viral has accelerated things. You know how these situations work. Once the public becomes aware of a dangerous wild animal, officials feel pressured to act." Maya moved to the window, looking out at the peaceful forest surrounding the cabin. Shadow had finished eating and jumped up to the windowsill beside her, seemingly sensing her tension. "Lieutenant, what happens to Shadow if FWP takes custody?" There was a pause before Harlow answered. "Best case, she's held at their wildlife center until Callahan recovers and can reapply for custody, proving he can still properly care for her. Worst case, he didn't need to finish." Maya knew that many wild animals who entered official custody never returned to their previous situations. Assessment protocols typically favored caution over compassion, especially with predator species. "Sir, I need you to delay them, at minimum until Catherine Callahan arrives. She's the legal alternate handler listed on the exemption documentation. On what grounds can I justify that delay, Rodriguez? Maya thought quickly. The documentation. Tell them I'm currently reviewing all legal papers with Ms. Callahan by phone to ensure proper transfer of care responsibilities. That should buy a couple of hours without anyone directly contradicting you. Another pause. Maya could almost hear Harlow weighing his options, balancing department relations against what he likely recognized as an injustice in the making. 2 hours, he finally said. That's all I can reasonably stall them. And, Rodriguez, get those documents in order. When they arrive, this needs to be by the book. Understood. Thank you, sir. After Harlow signed off, Maya moved quickly. Following Catherine's instructions, she located the safe in Callahan's bedroom closet and entered his military ID number. Inside, she found a meticulously organized collection of documents, Shadow's complete legal file. The paperwork was impressively thorough. Official exemption certificates, training logs spanning years, regular behavioral assessments, letters from VA psychiatrists detailing the therapeutic benefits Shadow provided. Even a formal research study in which Callahan and Shadow had participated, demonstrating the efficacy of non-traditional service animals for combat veterans with severe PTSD. Most compelling was a letter from Callahan's primary psychiatrist describing how conventional treatments had failed to significantly improve his condition until Shadow entered the picture. The doctor detailed with clinical precision how the Bobcat's presence regulated Callahan's physiological stress responses in ways that medication alone never had. Maya arranged these documents on the kitchen table, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. She then called Catherine Callahan for an update. I'm about 90 minutes out, Catherine reported. Just past Bozeman. I called the hospital. James is stable. They did an angioplasty last night to clear a partial blockage. He's conscious and asking about Shadow. That's good news, Maya said. But we have a situation developing here. FWP is sending officers with an emergency custody order for Shadow. I've bought us some time, but they'll be here before you arrive. Catherine's sharp intake of breath carried clearly over the phone. They can't take her. James's whole recovery depends on knowing she's safe. I'm going to do everything I can to prevent that, Maya assured her. But I need to know, is there anything in these documents that specifically addresses this type of situation? Temporary incapacitation of the handler. Yes, on page 6 of the exemption approval, there's a contingency clause for medical emergencies that names me as the authorized alternate handler. James made sure that was included after his minor heart attack 2 years ago. Maya quickly found the page in question, confirming Catherine's statement. The legal language was clear. In the event of the primary handler's temporary incapacitation, the designated alternate could assume all care responsibilities without invalidating the exemption. Outside, the sound of a vehicle approaching on the gravel road reached Maya's ears. Shadow tensed, moving to the window, ears forward. Someone's coming, Maya said, but it's too early to be FWP. James has neighbors about a mile down the road, Catherine explained. The Hansons. They sometimes check on him when he's been away. Maya moved to the front window, watching as an older model pickup truck pulled into the clearing. An elderly man with a weathered face and white hair stepped out, looking curiously at Maya's patrol car. I'll call you back, Maya told Catherine, ending the call and stepping onto the porch. Morning, the man called, approaching cautiously. Don't usually see State Patrol up here. Is James all right? Mr. Hanson, Maya asked. He nodded. Bill Hanson. My wife and I live down the road. Noticed James's lights on last night when he was supposed to be camping. Thought I'd check in. Maya explained the situation concisely. Hanson's concerned expression deepened as she described Callahan's medical emergency and the pending arrival of wildlife officials. Damn bureaucrats, he muttered when she finished. That cat's the best thing that ever happened to James. After he came back from overseas, he wasn't the same man. Shadow brought him back to himself. His Sister Catherine is on her way, Maya said, but FWP will arrive before she does. I'm trying to ensure they don't remove Shadow from the property. Hansen's weathered face settled into determined lines. Well then, officer, seems to me you could use a neighbor's support. Mind if I stay? Might help to have another voice vouching for Shadow and James. Maya smiled, grateful for the unexpected ally. I'd appreciate that, Mr. Hansen. As they returned inside, Shadow observed them from her perch by the window, golden eyes unreadable. Maya wondered if the Bobcat somehow understood the impending threat, if her remarkable intelligence extended to recognizing when humans were debating her fate. Maya checked her watch. Less than an hour before FWP would arrive, with Catherine still at least 90 minutes away. The documentation was solid, but would it be enough to convince wildlife officials determined to err on the side of caution? Or was she about to witness the severing of a life-saving bond between a wounded warrior and the unlikely companion who had helped heal him? The decision point was approaching. Stand firm on behalf of a man and animal she had known for less than 24 hours, potentially jeopardizing her professional standing, or step aside and let bureaucratic caution potentially destroy something irreplaceable. 4. Maya Rodriguez, daughter of a wildlife veterinarian who had taught her that animals were to be understood rather than feared. There was really only one choice. The sound of vehicles on the gravel road came exactly on schedule. 2 fish, wildlife and parks trucks pulling into the clearing in front of Callahan's cabin. Maya straightened her uniform and brushed back her hair, preparing for the confrontation. Shadow, stay, she instructed firmly, using the command she had heard Callahan use. The Bobcat, seemingly sensing the tension, had retreated to her armchair, watching the proceedings with alert wariness. Want me to handle the introductions? Bill Hansen offered, standing beside Maya on the porch. Known most of these fellas for years. Thank you, but I should take the lead officially, Maya replied, though having you here as a character witness will help. 4 people emerged from the vehicles, 3 in FWP uniforms, and 1 woman in civilian business attire with an official-looking portfolio under her arm. Maya recognized one of the uniformed officers as David Reeves, a veteran wildlife manager she'd worked with on previous highway incidents. Officer Rodriguez, Reeves acknowledged, approaching the porch. Unusual situation we've got here. David, Maya nodded. I appreciate you coming personally. Reeves gestured to his companions. These are Officers Blake and Turner and Ms. Keller from our legal department. Ms. Keller stepped forward, her expression professionally neutral. Officer Rodriguez, we have an emergency custody order for the Bobcat being held on these premises. We'll need you to facilitate its safe transfer to our wildlife rehabilitation facility. Maya maintained a calm, professional demeanor, though she felt her pulse quicken. I understand your concerns, Ms. Keller, but there's been a misunderstanding regarding the animal's status. Shadow isn't just any bobcat. She's a legally registered service animal under Montana's veteran exemption program. We're aware of Mr. Callahan's exemption claim, Keller replied, emphasizing the word claim in a way that made Maya bristle. However, with Mr. Callahan hospitalized indefinitely, the exemption provisions require reassessment. Actually, the provisions are quite clear, Maya countered, retrieving the folder of documents she'd prepared. The exemption includes a specific contingency for medical emergencies, designating Catherine Callahan, the owner's sister, as the authorized alternate handler. She's en route now and will arrive within the hour. Keller accepted the folder but looked skeptical. Even so, Officer Rodriguez, our department has an obligation to ensure public safety. A predator species without its primary handler presents a risk we're obligated to address. Bill Hansen chose this moment to interject. Risk? That cat's been nothing but good for this community, been living here peacefully for years. The only risk I see is bureaucrats interfering with a wounded warrior's recovery. Officer Reeves gave Hanson a sympathetic look. Bill, we understand your concern for your neighbor, but we have protocols. Protocols, Hanson interrupted, don't always serve the people they're meant to protect. That animal saved Callahan's life yesterday. And, from what I understand, she's been saving it every day since he returned from Afghanistan. Maya appreciated Hanson's passionate defense, but recognized the need to redirect the conversation to legal ground. Ms. Keller, the documentation clearly establishes Shadow's status and the provisions for temporary handler reassignment. Additionally, I should inform you that I've been in contact with the Veterans Service Advocacy Group, who are prepared to seek an emergency injunction if necessary. This wasn't entirely true. Maya hadn't contacted any advocacy group, but the implied threat of legal action and potential media attention might give them pause. Inside the cabin, Shadow had moved to the window, visible to the officers outside. Her calm demeanor and clear comfort in the domestic setting contrasted sharply with the dangerous predator narrative the FWP team seemed to be operating under. "May we come inside to assess the animal's condition?" Officer Blake asked, a young man whose hand had drifted unconsciously toward the tranquilizer gun holstered at his hip. Maya hesitated. Allowing them inside could either demonstrate Shadow's docile behavior or potentially trigger the very stress response they were concerned about. "One person," she negotiated. "Officer Reeves, since he has the most experience, and without restraint. Equipment visible. Shadow is sensitive to perceived threats." After a brief consultation, the FWP team agreed. Maya led Reeves inside while the others waited on the porch. Shadow retreated to her armchair but remained calm, watching the newcomer. With typical feline assessment. "This is the dangerous predator we're worried about?" Reeves muttered, observing Shadow's relaxed posture. "She's extraordinary," Maya said quietly. "Yesterday she traveled 3 miles to find help for Callahan, deliberately attracted attention on the highway, then led me all the way back to him. Does that sound like an animal that should be removed from her home?" Reeves studied Shadow thoughtfully. "Remarkable story, but you understand our position. Exotic predators are regulated, for good reason. She's not just an exotic pet," Maya insisted. "She's a therapeutic necessity for a veteran who risked everything for his country. The documentation proves it. Multiple VA psychiatrists have certified her role in Callahan's PTSD management. Taking her away could devastate his recovery." Before Reeves could respond, the sound of another vehicle approaching drew their attention. Through the window, Maya spotted Catherine Callahan's car pulling into the clearing, nearly an hour earlier than expected. "That's his sister," Maya said, relief evident in her voice. "The legal alternate handler." On the porch, Hanson was already greeting Catherine, a woman in her early 60s with the same steady blue eyes as her brother. She carried herself with a quiet confidence as she approached the FWP officials. "I understand you're here about Shadow," she said without preamble. "I'm Catherine Callahan, James's designated alternate handler, as specified in his service animal exemption." Ms. Keller, still reviewing the documentation Maya had provided, looked up. "Ms. Callahan, while your brother's paperwork does indeed name you as an alternate, we need to verify your qualifications to handle a predator species." Catherine smiled thinly. "I was a wildlife biology professor at Montana State for 30 years before retiring. I helped James design Shadow's training program and have cared for her during his previous medical issues. I've completed all required alternate handler certifications as documented on page 12 of that file." Maya and Reeves rejoined the group outside, Shadow remaining safely inside. The dynamic had shifted perceptibly with Catherine's arrival, the FWP team's position weakening in the face of her credentials and the increasingly solid legal ground supporting Shadow's status. "We still have concerns about the animal's current mental state," Keller persisted. "The disruption to routine with Mr. Callahan's absence. Shadow demonstrated exceptional cognitive and emotional regulation yesterday," Maya interjected. "She recognized an emergency, sought appropriate help, and facilitated a rescue. That hardly suggests an animal prone to destabilization." Catherine nodded gratefully at Maya before addressing the FWP team. "I propose a reasonable compromise. I'll remain here with Shadow, maintaining her routine in familiar surroundings. Officer Rodriguez can file her official report detailing Shadow's behavior during yesterday's incident and today's observation period. Your department can schedule a standard welfare check in 48 hours, by which time James may well be released from the hospital." The FWP officials conferred among themselves. Finally, Reeves stepped forward. "That seems reasonable, with one addition: daily. Check-ins by phone until Mr. Callahan returns home." Ms. Keller didn't look entirely satisfied, but nodded her agreement. "We'll need signed statements from both of you regarding supervision protocols and immediate notification of any behavioral changes." "Of course," Catherine agreed readily. As the paperwork was prepared and signed, Maya felt the tension that had knotted her shoulders begin to ease. Inside the cabin, Shadow remained on her perch, golden eyes following the proceedings through the window with that uncanny intelligence that had first captured Maya's attention on a mountain highway the day before. "Officer Rodriguez," Catherine said quietly while the others were occupied with documentation, "James called from the hospital this morning. They're releasing him tomorrow with medication adjustments and restrictions on physical activity. He wanted me to thank you personally for keeping your promise to him, for understanding what Shadow means to him." Maya smiled, watching as Shadow stretched languidly on her armchair. The immediate threat to her security now passed. "I think I do understand at least a little better than I did yesterday. They've helped each other heal in ways that defy conventional categories." "That's exactly it," Catherine nodded. "James saved Shadow when she was orphaned in a war zone, and she's been returning the favor ever since. Some bonds transcend our usual understanding." The FWP team finally departed, leaving Maya with a sense of quiet accomplishment. She had navigated a bureaucratic labyrinth, protected a unique relationship, and perhaps most importantly, kept her word to a man who had already endured more than his share of battles. As Catherine settled in and began preparing to bring her brother home the next day, Maya knelt beside Shadow's armchair, meeting those intelligent golden eyes directly. "Take care of him," she said softly, "though I suspect I don't need to tell you that." Shadow blinked slowly, a gesture Maya's father had always described as a cat's kiss, a sign of trust and affection rarely bestowed, especially by wild species. Whether it was imagination or reality, Maya felt something pass between them in that moment, a recognition of the journey they had shared and the challenges they had overcome together. 3 days later, Maya found herself driving back up the winding road to Callahan's cabin. Her shift had ended an hour ago, but instead of heading home, she had changed into civilian clothes and pointed her personal vehicle north from Bozeman. Catherine had called that morning with news that James was being released from the hospital, and Maya had surprised herself with how quickly she had offered to visit. "Just to check in," she had explained, both to Catherine and to herself, but the truth was more complex. Something about this case, about Shadow and James Callahan, and their extraordinary bond, had lodged in her consciousness, refusing to be filed away like other incidents. The autumn afternoon was crisp and clear, the mountains surrounding the cabin painted in the rich golden hues of late fall. As Maya pulled into the clearing, she noticed Callahan's truck was now parked beside Catherine's car, confirming his return home. She gathered the small gift bag from her passenger seat, a book on wildlife behavioral science she had spotted in a Bozeman bookstore, and approached the cabin. Catherine answered her knock, greeting her with a warm smile. "Officer Rodriguez, what a pleasant surprise. Please come in. Just Maya today," she replied, returning the smile. "I'm off duty. How is he doing?" Catherine led her inside, speaking quietly. "Better than the doctors expected. His cardiac function is good, considering. They've adjusted his medications, and he's under orders to take it easy for a few weeks. But the prognosis is positive." The cabin's main room was empty, except for Shadow, who lay sprawled in a patch of sunlight near the window. The Bobcat lifted her head at Maya's entrance, ears perked forward in recognition. "James is resting on the back porch," Catherine explained. "The sunshine and fresh air seem to be good for him. Shadow has hardly left his side since he got home, but she's finally taking a break. Would you like to see him?" Maya nodded, suddenly feeling slightly nervous without the buffer of official duty. During the past 3 days, she had found herself thinking often about the retired Marine and his extraordinary companion, wondering about their story beyond the fragments she had gleaned. The back porch was a simple wooden deck overlooking a small stream that wound through the property. James Callahan sat in an Adirondack chair wrapped in a thick blanket despite the afternoon warmth, his gaze fixed on the mountains beyond. He looked smaller somehow than he had on the mountainside, frailer, the lines in his weathered face deeper. Yet when he turned toward the sound of the door opening, his eyes were clear and alert. "Officer Rodriguez," he said, his voice stronger than she had expected. "Catherine said you might stop by." "Please, call me Maya," she replied, stepping onto the porch. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of mountain goats," he chuckled, gesturing to the chair beside him. "But I'm told I should be grateful to be feeling anything at all." Maya sat, placing the gift bag beside her chair. "The doctors say your prognosis is good?" "Good enough, considering I tried to hike out of a cardiac event with a bad ankle," he said wryly. "They're calling it a moderate heart attack. Could have been much worse if help hadn't arrived when it did." His expression softened. "Catherine tells me you're the reason Shadow wasn't taken to a wildlife facility." Maya shrugged slightly. "I just made sure everyone understood her legal status. Your documentation was extremely thorough." "Had to be," Callahan nodded. "When you're trying to convince the authorities that a bobcat is a legitimate service animal, you leave nothing to chance." He glanced toward the door. "Where is she anyway?" "Sunning by the window, taking a break from nurse duty, according to your sister." A smile touched Callahan's lips. "She's been glued to me since I got home. Always is when I'm unwell, like she's monitoring my condition." He turned to look directly at Maya, his blue eyes intense. "Catherine told me everything. How Shadow went all the way to the highway, how she led you to my campsite, and then up to where I had collapsed. I still can hardly believe it." "It was remarkable," Maya agreed. "In all my years with the Highway Patrol, I've never seen anything like it." "She's always been extraordinary," Callahan said, his voice taking on a reverent quality. "From the first moment I found her in Afghanistan." Maya leaned forward slightly, unable to contain her curiosity. "Would you mind telling me that story? How you found her?" Callahan's eyes took on a distant look, gazing back through years of memory. "It was 2010, my third deployment. We were running patrols near a village in Helmand province that had seen heavy fighting. There was this abandoned compound we needed to clear. Standard procedure, looking for weapons caches or insurgent materials." He shifted in his chair, wincing slightly at some remembered pain, either physical or emotional. The place had been hit by an airstrike a few days earlier, not much left standing. As we were sweeping through, I heard this sound, this tiny, desperate mewling coming from beneath some rubble. Callahan's weathered hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "I should have ignored it. Protocol said to keep moving, stay focused, on the mission, but something made me stop, made me kneel down and look beneath this collapsed wall. His expression softened at the memory, and there she was. Couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, eyes barely open. Her mother must have been killed in the strike. She was the only survivor of her litter. 3 others lay dead beside her. Maya tried to imagine the incongruity of that moment, the harsh reality of war, interrupted by the discovery of vulnerable new life. My first sergeant wanted to leave her, Callahan continued. Said we weren't running a rescue operation. And he was right by the book, but I couldn't do it. Couldn't leave her to die slowly in that rubble. He smiled faintly, so I tucked her inside my vest against my body heat and carried her for the rest of the patrol. Fed her with an eyedropper from my med kit. The guys in my unit thought I was crazy, but they helped me keep her alive. Our interpreter told us she was an Afghan bobcat, similar to our North American species, but slightly different coloration. How did you manage to bring her home? Maya asked, knowing the military had strict regulations about such things. Callahan's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. That's a story involving several sympathetic officers, a military veterinarian who classified her as a biological research specimen, and some creative paperwork. Let's just say that by the time my tour ended, enough people had become invested in Shadow's survival that ways were found to make it happen legally. The door opened behind them, and Catherine emerged with a tray holding glasses of iced tea. Shadow slipped out alongside her, immediately moving to Callahan's side and leaping gracefully into his lap. "Easy, girl," he murmured as she settled against him, her spotted head tucked under his chin. "I'm still a bit fragile." Shadow seemed to understand, adjusting her position to avoid putting pressure on his chest. The loving familiarity of the gesture brought an unexpected lump to Maya's throat. "When I came home," Callahan continued after taking a glass from Catherine, "things were difficult. The transition back to civilian life is challenging for many veterans, but for me, it was particularly hard. The doctors called it severe PTSD, complicated by traumatic brain injury from an IED explosion during my second tour." He stroked Shadow absently, the bobcat purring softly under his touch. "I was on a dozen different medications, seeing therapists 3 times a week, but I was still barely functioning. Nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety so severe I could barely leave the house. The memories and the guilt, they were crushing me." Catherine, who had taken a seat on Callahan's other side, reached over to squeeze his hand gently. "We were losing him," she said quietly to Maya. "Not physically, but the James we knew was disappearing." Shadow was just a half-grown cat then, Callahan continued, still wild in many ways, still learning to trust. "We were rehabilitating each other, I suppose. I had no idea then what she would become for me." His eyes took on a distant look again. "The first time it happened, I thought it was a coincidence. I was having a nightmare. Back in that village where everything went wrong, where we lost Harris and Delgado. Shadow woke me, patting my face with her paw, making that chirping sound she makes when she's concerned." The bobcat shifted in his lap, as if recognizing her role in the story. "But then it happened again the next night, and the night after that. She started alerting before the nightmares even hit their worst point. Then I noticed she would come find me during the day, about 20 minutes before I'd have a panic attack. She could somehow sense the changes in my body, maybe my breathing or heart rate or some scent I was giving off, before I was even aware of what was happening." Callahan took a sip of his tea, his eyes clearing as he returned to the present. "My VA psychiatrist noticed the pattern during a home session. She'd heard about service dogs for PTSD, but never a wild cat. She encouraged me to document everything, to see if we could formalize Shadow's role somehow. That led to participation in a research study on non-traditional therapy animals, which eventually supported Montana's exemption program for veterans." Maya listened, fascinated by the journey that had led to the extraordinary partnership she had witnessed. And the training? How did you develop that? Years of patience, Callahan smiled. Shadow isn't trained like a service dog would be. Her behavior is partly instinctive, partly learned through positive reinforcement. The whistle commands, the tracking practice, the trust exercises, all built slowly over time. He looked down at Shadow with such profound love that Maya felt like an intruder witnessing something deeply personal. She's saved my life every day, for years, in ways most people couldn't understand. And then she saved it in the most literal way possible on that mountain. The conversation paused as they all contemplated the remarkable chain of events that had brought them together. The late afternoon sunlight slanted across the porch, gilding Shadow's spotted coat and Callahan's silver hair with the same golden light. "I brought you something," Maya said finally, reaching for the gift bag beside her chair. "Just a small thank you for trusting me with Shadow's care." Callahan accepted the bag with a surprised smile, carefully extracting the book inside. "Cognitive abilities in non-domesticated species," he read from the cover. "This is perfect. I've been collecting research on this subject for years. My father is a wildlife veterinarian," Maya explained. "I grew up surrounded by animals that most people never interact with. He always taught me that wild creatures are to be respected for their intelligence, not just feared for their strength." "A wise man," Callahan nodded. "Too many people see only the danger in wild things, missing the wonder entirely." As the conversation continued into the evening, Catherine prepared a simple dinner, which they ate on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in fiery hues. Shadow remained close to Callahan, occasionally accepting gentle scratches behind her ears from Maya, a privilege she sensed was not granted to many. When Maya finally rose to leave, the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Callahan walked her to the door, moving slowly but steadily, Shadow at his heels. "Will you visit again?" he asked as they reached her car. "Perhaps when I'm a bit stronger. I'd like to introduce you to Shadow properly, show you what she can." "Adieu when I'm not half dead on a mountainside," Maya smiled, surprised by how much she wanted to accept the invitation. "I'd like that very much." As she drove back toward Bozeman through the gathering darkness, Maya reflected on the extraordinary series of events that had begun with a Bobcat on a highway and led to this moment. In her 8 years with the Highway Patrol, she had responded to countless calls, helped numerous people in crisis, but none had affected her quite like this one. Shadow and James Callahan had shown her something rare and precious, a connection that transcended conventional boundaries between human and wild, between brokenness and healing. Their story reminded her why she had chosen this path in life, to protect not just the law, but the deeper values that gave it meaning. 2 weeks after James Callahan returned home from the hospital, Maya Rodriguez found herself driving the now familiar, a route to his cabin once again. This time, however, her visit was both personal and professional. Lieutenant Harlow had assigned her to conduct the final follow-up for the incident report, officially closing the case that had begun with a Bobcat on Highway 191. "Consider it a courtesy assignment," Harlow had said with a knowing look, "since you've developed such a rapport with the principals involved." Maya hadn't bothered to hide her smile. The truth was, she had visited the cabin twice more during Callahan's recovery, drawn by a growing friendship with both James and Catherine, and an undeniable fascination with Shadow. Each visit had revealed new dimensions of the extraordinary relationship between the veteran and his Bobcat, deepening Maya's appreciation for what they had accomplished together. As she pulled into the clearing, Maya noticed immediate changes. Since her last visit, Callahan's truck was parked beside a stack of fresh-cut firewood. The cabin's windows stood open to the crisp autumn air, and the sound of hammering came from somewhere behind the structure. Before Maya could exit her car, Shadow appeared on the porch, alerted by the sound of her arrival. The Bobcat watched with intent golden eyes as Maya gathered her department clipboard and approached. Over the past weeks, Shadow had gradually relaxed around her, moving from cautious tolerance to what Maya liked to think of as friendly acceptance. "Hello, Shadow," she greeted, pausing at the bottom of the porch steps. "Is your human around?" As if understanding perfectly, Shadow turned and trotted to the side of the cabin, looking back expectantly. Maya followed, rounding the corner to find James Callahan on a ladder against the cabin wall, repairing loose siding. He looked remarkably improved. Color had returned to his face, and though he moved with careful deliberation, the frailty that had marked him after his hospitalization had largely disappeared. "Should you be doing that?" Maya called up to him, unable to keep the concern from her voice. Callahan glanced down, a smile spreading across his weathered face when he saw her. "The doctor said moderate activity is good for recovery. Emphasis on moderate." He descended the ladder carefully. "Besides, winter's coming. Can't have drafty siding when the snow flies." Shadow circled them both. Her tail held high in what Maya had learned was a sign of contentment. Callahan reached down to scratch between her ears, the gesture automatic and affectionate. "Catherine went into town for supplies," he explained, gesturing toward the cabin. "But come in. I just made a fresh pot of coffee." Inside, the cabin felt warmer and more lived in than during Maya's previous visits. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and books lay open on the coffee table alongside handwritten notes. Callahan moved to the kitchen with growing confidence, his limp from the ankle injury barely noticeable now. "Officially, I'm here to complete the incident report," Maya explained, accepting the mug he offered. "But I wanted to see how you both were doing." Callahan settled into his armchair, Shadow immediately leaping up to curl beside him. "We're healing," he said simply. "Thanks in no small part to you." Maya shook her head. "I just did my job." "No," Callahan countered firmly. "Your job would have been to follow protocol, hand Shadow over to FWP, and file your paperwork. You went far beyond that. Catherine told me how you stood up for us, how you used your understanding of the exemption laws to protect Shadow while I couldn't." Heat rose in Maya's cheeks. "I recognized something worth protecting." Callahan's blue eyes studied her thoughtfully. "Not everyone would have. Most people see a wild animal and default to fear. You saw the whole picture." They completed the official paperwork efficiently, documenting the final details of Callahan's rescue and recovery. Shadow remained close, occasionally watching the proceedings with that uncanny focus that still fascinated Maya. "So what happens now with Shadow's legal status?" Maya asked as she tucked the completed forms into her clipboard. "Will there be additional review because of the incident?" Callahan smiled, a hint of triumph in his expression. "Quite the opposite, actually. The Veteran Service Animal Program is using our case as evidence in their lobbying efforts. Apparently, a service Bobcat who journeys 3 miles to seek help for her incapacitated handler makes a compelling argument for expanding non-traditional service animal classifications." "They're not wrong," Maya chuckled. "I still can't believe she did that." "Believe it," Callahan said softly, stroking Shadow's spotted back. "I've learned never to underestimate her. The research team from Montana State wants to include her in a new study on animal cognition and emotional intelligence. They're particularly interested in how she recognized signs of my cardiac distress before I did." Maya thought back to that day on the mountain, to Shadow's desperate attempts to communicate urgency to humans who couldn't understand her language. She knew exactly what she was doing, didn't she? Finding help wasn't random. It was deliberate. absolutely deliberate. Callahan confirmed. Dr. Levinson, the lead researcher, believes Shadow has developed what he calls emergency response cognition. She can differentiate between my routine health fluctuations and genuine medical emergencies, and has somehow conceptualized that, when the latter occurs, seeking human assistance is the appropriate action. The scientific terminology couldn't diminish the wonder of what Shadow had accomplished. Maya watched as the Bobcat stretched languidly beside Callahan, her powerful muscles rippling beneath her spotted coat, wild strength contained in a creature who had chosen connection over instinct. The researchers want to develop a training program based on Shadow's abilities, Callahan continued. They believe other rescued predator species might be capable of similar bonds with handlers who have the right background and training. Your experience in Afghanistan and wildlife rehabilitation makes you uniquely qualified, Maya observed. That's their theory. Not everyone will have those specific qualifications, but the principles might be adaptable. Callahan leaned forward, enthusiasm lighting his features. Imagine the possibilities. Veterans with PTSD working with rescued. Wildlife that can't be released back into the wild. Both getting a second chance at life. The vision was compelling. Wounded warriors and wounded wild things healing each other through connection and purpose. Maya could see why Callahan had embraced the research opportunities so wholeheartedly. I've been asked to consult on the program development, he added. Once my cardiac rehabilitation is complete, of course. That's wonderful, Maya said sincerely. Your experience could help others find what you and Shadow have found. Callahan nodded, his expression turning reflective. When I brought her home from Afghanistan, I thought I was saving her. Had no idea she would end up saving me in every way that matters. His weathered hand gently stroked Shadow's head. Some debts can never be repaid. I can only pay them forward. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as the afternoon progressed. Catherine returned with supplies, greeting Maya warmly before insisting she stay for dinner. The three humans and one remarkable Bobcat shared a meal as the day faded into evening, the conversation flowing easily among them. As twilight deepened outside the cabin windows, Callahan suddenly looked toward Shadow, who had gone completely still, her ears perked forward in high alert. What is it, girl? He asked quietly. Shadow moved to the window, her body language tense but not alarmed. Callahan joined her, peering out into the gathering darkness. Ah, he said with a smile, we have visitors. Maya and Catherine followed him onto the porch, where Shadow had already taken up position at the railing. In the clearing before the cabin, illuminated by the porch light, stood a female elk and her half-grown calf, calmly grazing on the tall grass at the forest's edge. They come most evenings, Catherine explained softly. James thinks they're drawn to the salt block he keeps near the woodpile for wildlife observation. The elk cow raised her head, aware of their presence but seemingly unconcerned. Shadow watched the wild visitors with intense interest but made no move to chase or threaten them. Most people would expect a bobcat to see elk as prey, Maya whispered, amazed by Shadow's restraint. She's learned to categorize, Callahan explained proudly. The elk are not prey in her understanding. They're neighbors, familiar presences that belong to her territory but aren't for hunting. She reserves her predatory instincts for the rabbits and squirrels in the forest, never the regular visitors to the clearing. The four of them stood in comfortable silence, watching the elk graze peacefully in the growing darkness. The moment felt sacred somehow, a perfect harmony of wild and tame, of nature and humanity coexisting in mutual respect. When Maya finally prepared to leave, Callahan walked her to her car, Shadow padding silently beside him. The stars had emerged overhead, brilliant in the clear mountain sky. Next time you visit, he said, I'd like to show you the trail system behind the cabin. Shadow and I have been walking a little farther each day as part of my cardiac rehab. The doctor says my recovery is ahead of schedule. "I'd like that," Maya replied, suddenly reluctant to depart. Callahan seemed to sense her hesitation. "You know, some things happen for a reason, Officer Rodriguez. If Shadow hadn't found you specifically that day, someone who understood both wildlife and the law, things might have turned out very differently for us." Maya thought about the chain of coincidences that had brought them together. Her patrol assignment that day, her background with her father's wildlife work, her presence at precisely the right moment on Highway 191. "Maybe it wasn't coincidence," she suggested. "Shadow is pretty smart. Maybe she was waiting for exactly the right person to come along." Callahan laughed softly. "I wouldn't put it past her." As if to confirm this assessment, Shadow approached Maya directly, something she rarely initiated. The Bobcat gazed up at her with those intelligent golden eyes, then deliberately pressed her head against Maya's hand, the feline gesture of acceptance and trust. "Well," Callahan said with evident pleasure, "seems you've been officially adopted into our unusual family." Maya smiled, gently scratching behind Shadow's ears the way she had seen Callahan do. "I'm honored," she said, and meant it. Driving back toward Bozeman under the canopy of stars, Maya reflected on how a routine highway call had unexpectedly enriched her life. She had always believed in the special bond between humans and animals. Her father's influence ran deep, but Shadow and James Callahan had shown her possibilities beyond anything she had imagined. A wild bobcat from the mountains of Afghanistan, and a wounded warrior from the battlefields of the same country, healing each other through understanding and trust. Their story defied conventional wisdom about the boundaries between wild and tame, between animal instinct and human connection. As the lights of Bozeman appeared on the horizon, Maya made a mental note to call her father tomorrow. He would love hearing about Shadow's remarkable journey and about the new direction Maya's own journey had taken, guided by a bobcat who knew exactly who to ask for help. The audience fell silent as James Callahan finished speaking, his steady voice carrying throughout the packed conference hall at Montana State University. Beside him on the small raised platform sat Shadow, regal and composed, despite the hundreds of eyes fixed upon her. And that's how a bobcat from Afghanistan and a broken Marine found healing together in the mountains of Montana, he concluded. "Thank you." Thunderous applause erupted as Maya Rodriguez, seated in the front row, rose to her feet. The presentation, non-traditional. Service animals breaking boundaries in PTSD treatment, had captivated the audience of medical professionals, veterans advocates, and wildlife specialists. Shadow's ears twitched at the noise, but she remained calmly seated beside Callahan, the red service bandana around her neck now emblazoned with an official emblem, the newly established Veterans Wildlife Partnership Program. As the crowd dispersed for the reception, Maya made her way to the stage. "Perfect delivery," she said, embracing Callahan warmly. "You had them mesmerized." "Shadow did the mesmerizing," he chuckled, glancing down at his companion. "I just provided the narration." Catherine appeared with refreshments, her eyes bright with pride. "3 more veterans have been accepted into the pilot program," she announced. 2 with rescued wolves and 1 with a rehabilitated eagle that can't be released. Maya knelt to greet Shadow, who bumped her head affectionately against Maya's hand, their ritual greeting. "And to think it all started with you blocking traffic on Highway 191, she murmured. "The past year had brought remarkable changes." Callahan's complete recovery had been followed by growing national attention to Shadow's story. The Veterans Administration had launched a formal study of animal-assisted therapy for combat-related PTSD, with Callahan and Shadow as consultants. Montana's exemption program for non-traditional service animals had been expanded and formalized, with several other states now developing similar legislation. For Maya, the changes had been more personal. Regular visits to the cabin had evolved into hiking expeditions with Callahan and Shadow, deep conversations by the fireplace, and eventually a decision to transfer to the Highway Patrol Division covering Gallatin County, allowing her to be closer to the unusual family that had adopted her. Officer Rodriguez? A young Marine in dress uniform approached hesitantly. "Sir," he nodded to Callahan, "I just wanted to say, your story gives me hope. I've been struggling since coming home from Syria." Callahan clasped the young man's shoulder warmly. "The program is accepting applications for the spring cohort. Maya here can point you toward the right forms." As Maya provided the information, Shadow watched the interaction with those intelligent golden eyes that had first captured Maya's attention on a mountain highway. The Bobcat, who had once desperately sought human help, now sat calmly as humans. Sought her wisdom, a bridge between worlds, showing what was possible when boundaries dissolved. "Some things happen for a reason," Callahan had said that night a year ago, looking at Shadow now, the extraordinary animal who had saved a man's life through courage and devotion, who had changed policies through her example, who had brought together a circle of friends that felt increasingly like family. Maya could only agree. Some connections transcend every boundary we think we understand, reminding us that healing often comes from the most unexpected sources. Sometimes it comes with spotted fur and golden eyes, showing us the way home.